Hey there, family, and welcome back. Rachel here. I'm so thankful that you are joining me again today as we continue to build a firm foundation in Christ. If you are new here, welcome. I am so thankful that you are joining us on this side of the internet and choosing to explore a little bit more deeply what it looks like to have a firm foundation in Christ. That's what we're all about. So before we dive too deeply in, I just want to remind you to go ahead and subscribe to this channel because that's when you will be notified of all the things that are going on. So subscribe and turn on those notifications. So today I want to talk about something that I think can be a little confusing at times, but is so essential to us understanding how God works on a day-to-day basis. And that is the sovereignty and the providence of God. So I want to tell you a story. So a couple years back, maybe like 2020, which is not really a couple years, but I was going to visit my dad. Now, typically my dad comes over and we watch Rifleman and he eats and he comes over on specific days. But this time, one of his favorite gospel artists, Mahalia Jackson, was coming out with a movie. So if you know anything about Mahalia Jackson, you know that there was a recent movie that came out that kind of told her story. And I grew up listening to Mahalia Jackson with my dad. So I was like, Dad, we got to watch this. I'm going to watch it with you. I'm going to bring over some food. We're going to have a good time. Now, again, I don't normally go over there. I normally just go pick him up. He comes to my house because he loves being in my house. He loves eating my food. And that's a good thing when your daddy loves your food. So this particular day, it started off kind of rough. I was running behind on a lot of things. We had planned the day that I was going to come over there, but things were just like not rolling the way that it needed to. And I was so frustrated because by the time I was headed to him, the movie had already started. And I'm like, I still got to get the food. I still got to do this. I still got to do that. And the day was not flowing the way that I wanted it to so that I could make it there on time. And it was just bothering me. So one thing led to another, and there were just so many delays. And have you ever experienced where you're trying to get somewhere at a certain specific point in time, and it seems like everything is slowing you down? And sometimes I'll say, okay, God, this is you. You slowing me down. You keeping me from something. But this particular day, I'm like, God, I just want to go watch this movie with my dad. Well, I eventually get there. I was like, Dad, do you still want me to come? He's like, yeah. So I go grab the food. I make it there. And as I'm walking up the steps in his apartment, I smell something. And I'm like, that's really strange. And it was like a smell of gas. And I'm like, why do I smell gas in his apartment complex? So I keep walking. I'm just paying attention. And typically I would go up the elevator, but I felt led to go up the stairs in a specific set of stairs this time. So I go up these specific stairs. And when I get closer to the floor that he's on, the smell is even stronger. And I'm like, something is wrong. When I get on the part of the floor he's on, it is extremely strong. So I knock on his door and I say, Dad, there is like smell of gas out here. Do you smell it? And he's like, yeah. So I called some friends at the time who were on the same floor, and they said, well, yeah, we smelled something, but we didn't think that it was that big of a deal. I'm like, okay. So then I called my husband like, hey, I think I'm smelling gas somewhere, but I don't know where to locate it. So I just waited. So he's just like, well, let's keep an eye. And he was going to make some phone calls. So the smell gets stronger and stronger and stronger. And I'm like, Dad, something's not right. You cannot sleep in this. We cannot stay here in this situation. So we ended up, I think, because I'm trying to get all the pieces together, I think he ended up coming with me for a little bit, or he ended up leaving out. One of the two happened. I don't remember exactly. But what I do remember is that the fire department, they get called. They locate the house or the apartment where the smell was coming from. The person had fallen asleep with the oven on. And they must have not turned it all the way on. So it was just a gas. It was the smell of gas, which we know, and they were smoking. So that could have turned into a whole situation. It took a while for the smell to get to go, but eventually it did. So my dad was able to stay there. Now, let me just say this. That was not a coincidence. When I say I don't typically go to my dad's house just because, not because I don't want to, but generally speaking, he comes over my house. So I just go pick him up and bring him over. So this was like a once in a year's event that happened. And then on top of that, for the fact to be that I get there and I don't go up the elevator is a whole nother thing. I go up the stairs and smell this. Had I gone up the elevator, the smell wouldn't have surprised me, because by me going up the stairs, I passed the very apartment where the smell was coming from. Had I gone up the elevator, I would not have passed that apartment. The fact that I was running behind led me to actually being there when it occurred. So I was there when everything happened and when the fumes started getting stronger. No one else had noticed it. People were just passing by. No one had noticed it. And I walked up there like, something's not right. Me being there on that day, I believe, saved my dad's life and several other people's, including the person in that apartment. That is what I am talking about when I say the sovereignty and the providence of God. You know, when I think about all the things that happened with my dad, I've been reading through the book of Genesis, and the story of Joseph really stood out to me in a different way. Normally, when I read the story of Joseph, I pay attention to the fact that, you know, he was a dreamer. He had these dreams. And because he had these dreams, it caused his brothers to hate him even more than they already did. They hated him so much because he was so loved by his father that his father gave him a tunic, or what people call a coat of many colors. So they sold him into slavery because he had these dreams that specifically said that he was going to rule over them. Several events happen. He becomes a leader in a position even then. Potiphar's wife lies on him and says that he's done something to her. He gets thrown into prison. He becomes a leader in the prison, and he interprets a dream for two of the prison mates. One works out well. One doesn't so much. The person who it works out well for, he says, listen, don't forget about me when you get up there. Help me get out of here, basically, is what he's saying. The person forgets about him for about 2 years until Pharaoh ends up having a dream. And the person says, I know someone who can interpret your dream. That brings Joseph out of prison. And Pharaoh then makes him second in command and a governor. Okay, so all of these things happen. I'm giving you the short version. It starts around Genesis 37. I encourage you to read the story. One thing that I have learned is that there's so much more to the story than we learned in Sunday school. There's so much more to every biblical story than we learned growing up, or if you didn't grow up in church, that you may have heard about or that someone may have told you. Read the fine line for yourself, because it makes it so different, and that's how God can reveal himself to you. Well, as I was reading through the story of Joseph, I wasn't caught up in all these events that happened. What stood out to me this time, and I've read this story so many times, was the sovereignty and the providence of God. God was so there in the midst of everything that happened with Joseph that he could not have pre-planned working out the way that it did. When he gave the dream to his brothers, when he told the dream to his brothers, he didn't know that he was saying that at 17. And by 32, 34, 37, however old he was somewhere in his 30s, he would actually be ruling over Egypt. And then he would later be able to save his brothers who came to him because it was a famine and would have died. And let me tell you, had Joseph not been put in that position, the 12 tribes of Israel may not have existed, because they would have possibly died in the famine. So God plucked Joseph out and said, I am going to place you over here so that you can save my people, who would later become the Israelites, who would later become the Jews or the Hebrews. They're all the same people. I'm going to pluck you out. You're going to go through about 13, 14 years of difficulty. It's not going to make sense to you why you are enduring what you are doing whatsoever, because you know that I gave you a dream. You know that I spoke to you, but I'm going to pluck you out because I'm sovereign. And you're going to see my hand when you go back and you look at what I've done and how I saved you. Joseph recognizes the hand of God when he is in front of his brothers during this famine. And he is dictating every move, giving out portions to people so that they can survive. And his brothers are standing in front of him. And he says these words in Genesis 45, 5-8. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years, the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his house, a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Joseph realizes that what has happened in his life was all the hand of God to save his people. So let's talk about what is sovereignty and providence. I want to give you the definitions first. The meaning of the word sovereignty is a supreme power or authority. Now, the meaning of the word providence is divine guidance or care. Now, I want to give you a few more definitions. John Piper, who is a biblical teacher, he gives this definition, and I think that it was amazing. He says, his sovereignty is his right and power to do all that he pleases. His providence is the exercising of that right and power purposefully. So when we look at the nature of God, he has the right and the power to do anything he wants to do. But his providence is how he actually exercises that right and that power in our lives. Tony Evans also said it, and I thought that this was great. It's a little bit longer, but he said, sovereignty means God's rule, the reign of God. Within his sovereign will is providence, the mysterious way God brings about results through the way he connects people, places, and things in order to connect them to accomplish something. Sovereignty is what he wants to happen. Providence is how he connects things so that they do happen. The difference between providence and sovereignty is that sovereignty includes everything, but providence includes you. When you look at the things that are going on in your life, where do you see the hand of God? Even when you look back and you say this and this and this happened, where do you see the hand of God orchestrating what happened to lead to an expected end? So we have to realize that when we allow God into our lives, he becomes sovereign in every area of our lives. But that also means that he's inviting us into moments that are so much deeper. He's saying, I want my will to be done this way in your life. I'm going to orchestrate a chain of events that's not going to make sense to you. But if you can trust me for just a moment, if you can choose to trust me for a lifetime, you know that my sovereignty and my providence will go hand in hand, and I will work this out for your good. This is not just something that we say in a cliche way. God truly has a heart to work things out for our good. And even in the midst of what Joseph was going through, you can't tell me he didn't have moments where he's like, God, when am I going to get out of this? When is this going to end? How much longer? Are you still there? What was that dream all about anyway that I had at the beginning, where you were showing me that I was going to roll over my brothers? I'm in prison right now. Like, how's this going to happen? You know, we have a similar moment in the book of Esther. And if you have not gone through the Esther Bible study on my channel, I encourage you to. We go chapter by chapter through the book of Esther with just some fresh revelation. But we have a very similar moment in the book of Esther where we see the providence and the sovereignty of God come to a very critical point in the decision that Esther has to make. And it's when Mordecai goes to her and he basically says, if you do not do what you have been placed in this castle, this kingdom to do, God's going to send somebody else to do it. But don't think that you won't perish like the rest of us. Maybe you were placed here for this very moment. Maybe this was providence. Maybe God knew that this was going to happen. God knows everything. He knows why you're walking through what you're walking through and what that'll mean for you 10 years down the line. I've had so many moments in my life where I was like, God, why did I have to experience that situation? Why did I have to go through that specific challenge? And when I reverse engineer what happened, I'm like, wow, had that not happened, then this could have happened, then this could have happened, and then this could have happened, and I would have missed this. Had Joseph not been sold into slavery, then the 12 tribes of Israel may not have existed because they simply would have died from starvation and a very severe famine that God was warning Pharaoh about. Y'all, when we look at our situations, I want to encourage you to trust God. Trust both his sovereignty and that he is in the details. He's not leaving you He's not forgotten you. He's not just watching up in heaven like, ooh, how they gonna deal with that one? Ooh, that's the big one. He sees all and he knows everything. I want to read one more verse to you before we go. Ephesians 1:11. In him also we have obtained an inheritance, being predestined according to the purpose of him who works all things according to the counsel of his will. When we are trusting in God, we have to understand that God has a will. And when he is operating and orchestrating things to happen, it is to line up with his perfect, predestined, preordained will for our lives in that specific situation when we invite him in. So there are things that we're going to be unsure about. But what we have to be sure about is that God is faithful, God is just, God is sovereign, and God is kind. He is all of those things. He's not one or the other. And when we choose to trust him, we are trusting in the sovereignty of his nature and the love of his heart for his people. So the next time you are struggling to figure out, why am I going through this? This does not make sense. What does this right now have to do with what I am planning to do 5 years from now? I want to encourage you to trust God, to trust in his sovereignty, to trust in his providence, and to know that he has a perfect will for you. Okay, well, that's all for today. And as I always want to remind you, time with God is time you will never regret spending. See you in the